All right, this is Male Entrepreneur, episode number 186, 188. 188, and we are live in 3, 2. All right, welcome back to the Male Entrepreneur Podcast, the podcast for men who win, with your host, Purdeep Sangha. Purdeep, how you doing today, man?
I am doing awesome, man. Aside from these internet issues that we've been having over the last half an hour trying to connect you and I think we got those solved, but I'm doing pretty good.
Nice. So you're having a windstorm up there. We had a windstorm yesterday as of when we're recording this, so maybe it made its way up from Colorado all the way up to Canada.
Who knows, man? The weather this year has been crazy. Just nuts. I don't know if you heard, but in Western Canada, we had major fires for the summer, and then freak storm, heat wave at the same time. And then they had a massive flooding like a month ago. It was crazy. It basically knocked out the major freeway between the west and the east coast for trucking. So I'm kind of on the east coast, and all the freight comes in on the western coast, so in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the stores here, like Home Depot, for example, the shelves are sitting empty because there's no trucks coming through, or very little trucks coming through.
It is a crazy time to be alive. That's all I can say.
Yeah, definitely. So
All right.
yeah, let's just jump right into it, because that's weather, Mother Nature. We can't control that. It'd be nice if we could at some point, but I think if we get to that point of being able to control Mother Nature, I don't know. We're gonna have bigger issues, I think.
Yeah, I'm not entirely convinced that we're not already messing with Mother Nature, but that's a totally different podcast episode. What do we got on the agenda for today?
We'll call that episode "Go Green."
There you go. What do we got? What do we got for today, though?
Well, today we're going to be talking about getting respect for who you are versus what you do. This is an interesting one for us guys, especially because we tie a lot of our identity to our business or our career, our profession. And then we come home and then we expect to get that same level of respect at home. And it doesn't always work that way, especially when it comes to, your kids. I get this all the time, right? So I get, I'm a business owner, I'm an entrepreneur, and then I come home and it's like I get my kids ragging on me. They're calling me names sometimes, and I'm just like, "Oh, you little buggers!" Um, and I know that can frustrate a lot of guys, because I've had a number of these conversations where guys are like, "I just wish I would get that same level of respect at home."
So before we dive into that, because that's a whole can of worms by itself, I want to get your take, being that you are, you've been exposed to probably more different wide variety of cultures than I have. It feels like when I go onto Facebook, especially with like my entrepreneurial friends, I go to their Facebook page or their LinkedIn page, and their identity is their work. And when we meet people, at least here in the States, probably the same in Canada, probably the same in a lot of parts of the world, one of the first questions that we ask people is what they do, not what your hobbies are, not what brings you happiness and fulfillment, but what do you do? What do you do for work? What do you do for a living? So before we even dive into the can of worms of separating the two, like life, real life and work life, why is so much of our identity wrapped up in what we do for a living?
Well, I think it comes with the start of the industrial era, and then right now with entrepreneurship and business and career professions, especially over the last 100 years. Us as human beings, we're wired for status. That's one of the core evolutionary, you can say, traits that we've been wired with. There's 7 core traits that they say that we have, and that is one of them, to find status. And our status before was potentially, okay, how much food could we store? Were we the chief of the tribe? How much influence do we have? Now, a lot of that stems from what we do, from our career professions. And so it has the same relevance, you could say, that we've had for thousands of years, but just a different context. Now we just relate it to how much money we make and our titles. So that, in a nutshell, is what it is. And I think we've gone a little bit past that, because we are so, excuse me, focused on business these days and our careers, and we're working past 40-hour work weeks. So I think that's the other element, is that work has become so much more a part of our lives than it used to. And that's another big factor.
Well, and I'm even thinking like a lot of names like Smith comes from your father was a blacksmith and he trained you how to be a
Mm.
blacksmith. And so your last name is Smith. So at least in like Western culture, this, your work is your identity has been a long standing thing. It seems like.
Well, especially even in Eastern culture, the caste system in India,
Mm.
which has been ancient, a lot of it is based on your occupation. So our caste, technically, for example, in our sect, for example, is what we call Jat, and Jat stands for farmer. And a lot of us are farmers. We're farmers. We have an apple orchard and a cherry orchard. So we tie our status to owning land. So that is just a normal part of it. And if the culture is relates to that, um, then it's a lot easier to go through that. But things are changing because, like I said, the way we are at work is different than the way we are at home, or we should be to a certain degree. But we still expect that same level of appreciation and respect for our titles versus who we are. And that becomes a challenge for us.
So let's kind of dive into that then. I guess the separation. Sometimes there's a disconnect. And I felt this before as well in my career. I'm like, yes, things are going great. Everybody at work respects me. The people underneath me look up to me and they treat me with respect. And then I get home and my girlfriend doesn't appreciate the hard work that I'm doing. And she's just going to gripe and moan because I didn't get the trash out fast enough. And of course, all of our relationship problems are totally on her. But yeah, that disconnect, I know that I'm definitely not the only guy that's been like, hey, why doesn't my family, why doesn't my significant other appreciate me the way that people at work appreciate me?
Yeah, it definitely is a double-edged sword. I agree with you there, because we have to look from within first to see, okay, do we deserve to be respected at that level for who we are as a partner, or as a father, as a son, as a brother, whoever it is, rather than our title. And sometimes, yeah, we have some improvement and some work to do. And Nathan, I think about this all the time because I look at the frustrations, and I have them in our relationship. And I look at the frustrations and I always look and say, okay, how can I be better as a result of this? What can I learn? How can I look at things differently? What is it that I'm not seeing? And what do I need to do to improve that? And I can tell you that some of the biggest challenges in my relationship, or even as a father, um, have taught me a lesson. And I've become better as a result of that. So I wouldn't change that for the world, because I'm getting better and stronger every day from every single issue that we have in our relationship. But then there's always that level of frustration where it's just like, I just want a little bit of respect. And I learned that the hard way, because I'll have conversations with my wife and we'll talk about finances, for example. And she'll be like, well, what about this? And what about that? And I'm like, damn, woman, do you know how much money I manage? Like, and you're not even trusting me with this amount? Like, come on, give me some respect. Like, what am I, an imbecile? Um, but I have to go back and work at it from the level of our relationship, and be like, she doesn't understand what I do at work. She doesn't understand the level of responsibility that I have, or what I do from that perspective. So I have to appreciate that and communicate better. And as a result, I get better in the relationship, because I'm like, okay, I have to do things differently for myself.
Mhm. So one thing that I've noticed is as I've grown in my professional life, says the guy covered in face tattoos. Um, but as
They're
I've
cool
grown in my
face tattoos.
professional, what's that?
So they're cool face tattoos.
Thank you. Um, One thing that I've noticed though is the lessons that I've had to learn in entrepreneurialism and business ownership and business relationships. A lot of times I've had to step back and be like, why am I not employing these same principles in my personal relationships? Why am I not in business? One of the, advertising especially, be empathetic, understand where your person is that you're trying to communicate with is coming from. Make sure that you let them know that you understand them and you appreciate where they're coming from before you try and get them to do what you want them to do. And have it be a relationship of where you're trying to serve their needs. And then I'm like, well, I'm kind of a douchebag when it comes to my regular relationships because I'm not employing these same principles.
So is that a question, or is that?
It's a statement and a
Yeah.
hard realization that I had to come to a couple of years ago. But it's one of those things where I'm hoping you're going to say I'm not alone in
No, you're
this.
definitely not alone. Yeah, I would say almost every one of us guys faces that challenge. And I think it's just human nature for us to sometimes take things for granted and want to treat people a certain way, or want to be treated a certain way just because we get used to it. That's how we work. That's We get accustomed to things, right? And so our brain just oversees some things. And sometimes, in all honesty, all we need is just a little reminder. That's all it is sometimes we just forget. We just oversee things. And that's human nature, right? We're so busy. We're, we're always thinking about, okay, I got to do this. I got to take care of this. And things just slip from our mind. And that's why goal setting is important. That's why being intentional is important. And being intentional in every single interaction that you have. And I don't think many of us do this enough, where when we go into a new interaction, we are intentional to say, okay, what's my goal for this, or what's my outcome from this?
Mhm.
And if we become more conscious of that, then we're less likely to have those behaviors that become challenging. So I try to, and I'm not perfect by any means. And I always have to remind myself, but I'm like, okay, I have to be intentional now. I'm spending time with my kids. What is the outcome that I want to have from this? Okay, I'm spending time with my wife. I got to shut down work. What is the outcome that I want to have with my wife? If we can take it from that perspective, wow, things actually start to change.
Yeah, and I think especially in the world that we kind of exist in, high achieving professional people, we do set those conscious goals. We say, okay, I want to be earning this much. I want this
Mhm.
quarter to do this for me. I want the next quarter to do this for me. I want this investment to pay out this way for me. We're very conscious and deliberate about the decisions and the outcomes that we're striving towards in our professional lives. And I don't know if as many people are that conscious and deliberate with the familial relationships or their romantic relationships or their friendships. I think we just kind of expect those to kind of go on autopilot while we put all of our focus on our careers and our businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we take those relationships for granted. I was talking to a woman actually once about relationships, and how she was saying, you know what, it shouldn't be this tough, and relationships should be smooth, and if you find the right partner, it should be effortless. And I said, no,
Mm.
because it may be a lot smoother, but it requires work. It requires skill. It requires development. It requires effort to have a successful relationship, especially long term. So people who think that, we just think that relationships should be natural, right? This is who I am, and people should accept me, and things should just kind of fall into place. No, that's not how relationships are. Relationships are probably the toughest things in life.
Mhm.
I would say it is far more, for me in particular, tougher than business
Mhm.
by far. My wife and I have this conversation. I said, my business doesn't stress me out. That rarely stresses me out. You know what stresses me out? Us sometimes, right? When we're not on the same page, when we're having challenges when it comes to how we're parenting the kids, or we're on different. I'm kind of looked at as the bad dad, because I'm the tough one, right? I'm the strict one, and then everybody comes to me and says, you know what, your kids are misbehaving. You got to do something about it. Well, I'm like, you're the ones that are letting them misbehave. Why do I always have to be the bad guy?
Mm.
Right? So and that causes a tension or a challenge. But having that skill in a relationship is important. This is something I was thinking about the other day, Nathan. is that even for the highest performing businessmen, all the basic need that we all want, or the basic want that we all have, is to have deep relationships, to have affection from at least one other person.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it ultimately comes down to. And I've seen that. I've seen very successful businessmen have no intimate relationships, and they struggle,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even when we think about people who sit there and play video games all day, for example, well, a lot of the times they're not playing video games by themselves, they're playing video games with other people online. They're trying to connect. So all of these things, it really comes down to basic human connection. And going back to what the original topic of this conversation was, is that level of respect really just comes down to being able to connect.
Mm-hmm. I think for a lot of us, it's connection is kind of one of those underlying needs, and almost one of the reasons for even existing in the first place. It's one of the best things in life is establishing those relationships, finding somebody to share your life with, having kids, and then raising those kids and watching them grow up. Those things we're told, go to college, get a degree, get a high paying job. That's the road to happiness. And I just know for myself, I'm pretty successful in my business. I make a very comfortable living. I get to do work that I love. But honestly, the most fulfilling things in my life are my relationship with my daughter, my relationship with her mom, and some of the close friends that I have. And I don't know if there's one that I would say I prioritize, but I definitely feel like the business relationship is emphasized, or the business career path, whatever, professionalism is emphasized in society a lot more than relationships are. And you were talking earlier about the lady saying, well, relationships should just be easy. We have like all of these movies that are just like, oh, you fall in love with somebody and there's a little bit of bumpy at the beginning, but then you realize you're meant for each other and everybody lives happily ever after. And you really don't have to put much work into it. But yeah, just for me, I put a lot of work into building myself up to where I'm at in my career right now. But my most valuable things in life are my relationships.
I'm glad you see that, because a lot of guys don't, and they don't realize that until it's too late. Um, Nathan, you know how many guys I work with that are extremely wealthy and successful, and then they finally realize when stuff hits the fan that they're not really successful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're successful in one aspect, yeah, business, but everything else has fallen short with their relationships, with their kids, with their wives, with their parents. And then they have this oh crap mentality, but it's tough to get out of,
Mm-hmm.
because even when it's interesting, because I see this behavior. They go down this path of trying to rectify their relationships with these people and their spouses, for example, or the spouse, and they go down a path to a certain degree, and then they get pulled back into the business side, and then they go down again, and then they get pulled into the business side. It's so interesting to see how much of a pull that business has on us in the Western society. It is massive. It is huge. And I think with the influences that we have with social media and status, and especially depending on where you live too, if it requires a lot of money for you to live a certain lifestyle, well, then guess what? You're going to be paying more emphasis on money and career. Like, for example, where we live, just outside of Toronto, it's actually not that bad. But you go to Toronto, everywhere you go, and I saw this when I first moved here from the West Coast, was when I would date girls, one of the first things they would ask me is, what do you do for work?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, how about who I am? But I used to joke around with them. I used to tell them I'm an apple picker. And that's literally what I would say. And they'd be like, no, come on, tell me the truth. And I would just I played the game. I'd be like, I'm an apple picker. I'm a professional cherry picker. And And if they, stuck around, then good for them. If they didn't, too bad. But you get a sense of a person in terms of who they are or what's important to them. Not that
Hmm.
it's bad to emphasize money or career. Like, we shouldn't put that down. But if it doesn't match your priorities, then you want a person in your life whose priorities are somewhat similar.
Hmm.
I think that's the important thing for any relationship.
Yeah, values, goals, um, those things, though, they're de-emphasized for the career. So going back full circle to how we started out the conversation, even in our relationships, oftentimes the first question is, "What do you do for a living?" It's crazy. Um, we're about out of time. If you could wrap it up with one final thought, what would that be?
Yeah, focus on who you are. If you want to get that respect that you feel like you deserve, and we all want this is one of the core needs for guys. We all want to be respected. Then you got to look within and say, am I being that man that deserves a respect? And that's as simple as that. And if you take it from an ego perspective, you're going to be defensive. If you take it from the perspective of how do I learn and become better and become more powerful, watch,
Mhm.
you're going to look for flaws in yourself. And when you find those flaws, you're going to think, I love this. Now I can fix this or now I can improve it. And I'm going to be better off as a result.
Nice. All right, man. If people want to check out more episodes of the podcast, where's the best place to go?
Check out YouTubeformen.com or mailpodcast.com.
All right, sweet. And until next time, man, we'll catch you later.
Till next time.